Karoline. She's the spokesperson for one of the most controversial presidents in U.S. history, and a young mom trying to rock her baby to sleep each night. Born in a small town in New Hampshire, Karoline Leavitt did not grow up among political elites or in an academic family. Her parents, both without college degrees, owned a small business and worked 7 days a week, with no vacations, no set hours. Karoline's childhood wasn't spent on golf courses or international trips like many politicians. Instead, she helped at the family shop, stayed up late studying, and learned early that success doesn't come to the idle. So when she earned a full athletic scholarship to St. Anselm College, a prestigious Catholic institution known for producing conservative intellectuals, Karoline saw it not just as a personal achievement, but as a ticket into the system where she could change her own trajectory. At St. Anselm's, Karoline wasn't the loudest student in the room, but she was among the most tenacious, taking part in student groups, volunteering, media production, and especially political internships with local lawmakers. That's where she first found her calling, political media, a world she describes as a blend of competitive sports and persuasive reasoning. As she once said, politics is a strategic game, but not everyone dares to play on the field. Before becoming the face of the Trump administration's messaging, Karoline had already known defeat. In 2022, she ran for Congress in New Hampshire, won the primary decisively but lost in the general election. Many thought that would be the end of her political career, but Karoline didn't see it that way. She treated that loss as a necessary setback, famously saying, "Had I won, I wouldn't be here working for President Trump today." Her appointment as press secretary, the youngest in American history, didn't come as a gift. She earned it through thousands of hours of policy research, relentless confrontation with the media, and enduring personal attacks online. She wasn't just speaking into microphones. She learned to manage teams, craft communication strategy, and defend the president's image amid waves of backlash. What makes Karoline particularly compelling to the American public is the figure she represents. A young woman who didn't attend Ivy League schools, who wasn't born into privilege, yet now holds one of the most visible positions in Washington. In a nation increasingly split between elites and working-class citizens, her story resonates as proof that anyone willing to learn, work, and step up can claim a seat at the table. This is why Karoline has struck a chord with conservative young voters, especially those who feel dismissed by mainstream media. To them, she's not a mini-Trump, but rather a new voice, proving that politics in America still has room for humble beginnings and firm faith. In modern American politics, where most spokespersons carefully avoid religious topics, Karoline Leavitt stands as a bold exception. Not only does she openly identify as a practicing Catholic, she actively brings her faith into the public sphere, a move some consider at odds with the secular traditions of federal institutions. But to Karoline, faith isn't something to hide. It's the foundation of the courage and conviction she brings to the press podium. Each morning begins with prayer alongside her team, not for show, but as a moment of peace before stepping into the media storm. "Prayer helps me stay humble and clear-headed in dialogue," she once shared. To many, this seems simple, but in an age of deep religious polarization and progressive skepticism of traditional faith, it carries symbolic weight. The visibility of faith within the White House is sparking something new, not just among Catholics, but also among evangelicals, Jews, and Muslims invited to interfaith discussions through the Faith Office. Under Trump's administration, this office was reinstated and relocated near the Oval Office, a strong signal of the administration's priorities. A surprising trend is also unfolding among Gen Z, a resurgence of spirituality. Young people, particularly those under 30, are embracing prayer and Bible reading not in churches, but online. On platforms like TikTok and YouTube, content about faith, worship, and spiritual renewal is gaining millions of views. Karoline is becoming an icon of that trend, modern, yet rooted in tradition, confident in bringing faith back to the national conversation. Of course, criticism is unavoidable. Secular commentators accuse her of politicizing religion, while some progressive voices claim that praying before a press briefing violates the separation of church and state. But Karoline remains firm. "I don't ask others to believe, but I won't abandon my beliefs to appease the media." Beyond her political role, Karoline has captured widespread public attention as a young mother raising a child while handling one of the most demanding jobs in America. On platforms like Facebook and Instagram, she's become a symbol, not because she claims perfection, but because she's willing to show her flaws, the guilt of missing bedtime, the exhaustion of long days, the joy of reading Bible stories to her child before sleep. In a society that often asks women to choose, career or family, Karoline has chosen both, fully aware of the costs. "I've learned that saying no isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Family can't be the second priority," she said in an interview. This vulnerability makes her more relatable to the American public. She's not a model politician. She's a real woman giving her all each day. At a time when voters distrust the political class and yearn for authenticity, Karoline bridges the gap, briefing the press by day, buying diapers by night, drafting immigration policy while sharing bedtime prayers with her child. Her dual role as political figure and mother resonates not just with conservative women but also with independents and even some progressives. They may not support Trump, but they recognize in Karoline a strength, realism, and refusal to hide the struggles of working motherhood. Unlike others, she doesn't use motherhood as a political tool. She simply lives it, openly and truthfully. Some have compared her to inspiring figures like Sarah Huckabee Sanders or New Zealand's Jacinda Ardern, both of whom balanced leadership with motherhood. But what sets Karoline apart is her unfiltered approach. She doesn't curate an image, she embodies it. When a woman stands between the White House and a crib, it's not just a personal act. It's a cultural statement. The new era of women has arrived. As White House Press Secretary, Karoline Leavitt is not just delivering talking points. She's reshaping the relationship between the government and the media. Each day she steps up to the podium, facing off against seasoned journalists from prestigious institutions like the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, Reuters. Unlike many of her predecessors who treaded carefully, Karoline challenges, questions, and even outright dismisses what she sees as biased narratives. In one interview, she remarked, "Many journalists today aren't reporting. They're storytelling through a personal lens. They're not seeking truth. They're seeking validation from Twitter mobs." It's a pointed criticism of a growing trend in American journalism, the blurring line between reporting and opinion. Karoline calls them double-faced reporters. By day in the press room, by night on talk shows pushing partisan commentary, with American public trust in mainstream media at historic lows. Only about 34% believe in the integrity of the press, according to Gallup. Karoline's communication strategy is unapologetically disruptive. She doesn't avoid big media, but instead opens doors to independent journalists, podcasters, and digital creators on YouTube, TikTok, and other platforms. Voices typically excluded from the traditional media ecosystem. Her team has also revamped press room logistics, from seat assignments to who gets to ask questions. The Associated Press, one of America's oldest news organizations, was sidelined from certain key events due to ongoing litigation with the Trump administration. Karoline didn't flinch, calling it necessary fairness. As she put it, why should a few media outlets monopolize presidential access while thousands of others, speaking directly to real audiences, are pushed aside? This approach has stirred controversy. The White House Correspondents Association, WHCA, accuses the Trump administration of retaliating against the press and undermining journalistic freedom. But Karoline pushes back. We're not excluding anyone. We're simply including voices who've never had a chance. That's what democracy looks like. To her supporters, Karoline is injecting new life into a press system long seen as rigid and stale. But her boldness has also drawn criticism. Veteran journalists label her too combative, disrespectful of tradition, and a threat to press credibility. Karoline, however, anticipated this. She once said, "I'm not here to please the media. I'm here to protect the American people from being misled by dishonest headlines." And in an age when truth can be twisted by clickbait and spin, Karoline poses a question many Americans are now asking: who holds the media accountable? Do you still trust the media today? Or have you started turning to alternative voices? Share your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more. To many, Gen Z is synonymous with progressive ideals, individual freedom, social activism, and cultural diversity. But Karoline Leavitt represents a very different current within this generation. Conservative young people who cherish tradition, faith, and civic responsibility. And notably, they are not a fringe minority. Across college campuses and online platforms, there's a growing wave of young Americans turning away from radical progressivism and rediscovering foundational values. Topics like family structure, biological sex, Christian faith, and patriotism are gaining massive traction on TikTok, YouTube, and Twitter. Karoline, with her clear, unapologetic tone, has become a leading voice of that movement. As Trump's spokesperson, she's more than a message bearer. She's a bridge between her generation and his political vision. Some call her Trump's youth megaphone, but she goes beyond amplification. She speaks Gen Z's language. She knows they question everything, crave authenticity, and aren't easily swayed by legacy media. She uses that awareness to embed conservative messages into the platforms Gen Z already lives on. Karoline has often said that Trump isn't just a politician. He's a symbol of rebellion against a stale, out-of-touch system. To many conservative youth, he represents the shattering of political correctness and the injection of raw honesty into leadership. And Karoline, young, working class, and grounded, reinforces that image. You don't have to be a political dynasty or Ivy League alum to be heard. During campaign rallies, she fires up college conservative groups not with rehearsed speeches, but with real stories. She shares her defeats, her faith, and breaks down policy in relatable terms. This makes her far more accessible than traditional surrogates. Many young voters who previously distanced themselves from the Republican Party are now returning, not just because of Trump, but because of voices like Karoline's redefining conservatism. Of course, her role comes with backlash. From media critics to progressive student groups, Karoline has been labeled Trump's puppet, a far-right mouthpiece, and even targeted with personal online harassment. But rather than shrink from this, she uses it as proof of media bias, and it has only amplified her profile among young conservatives. Karoline believes Trump is paving the way for a spiritual and political revival in America, one where young people are taught not just to believe in themselves, but to believe in time-tested values: family, faith, nation, and truth. To her, policies like strict immigration control, pro-life protections, free speech, and Second Amendment rights are not right-wing relics, but vital pillars of American culture. What's notable is that she doesn't pressure others to adopt her beliefs. She simply presents them with clarity and conviction, a style of communication that's winning over even skeptical audiences. One of the fiercest and most polarizing arenas during Trump's presidency, and still raging in his current term, is the ongoing struggle between the executive branch and the federal judiciary. From the moment Trump returned to the White House, his administration has faced a barrage of emergency injunctions from district judges seeking to block key policies on immigration, borders, criminal justice, and the economy. Karoline doesn't mince words. She calls it a constitutional power crisis. She believes the judiciary is being misused by politically motivated judges, many of whom have public records of supporting Democratic campaigns or expressing anti-Trump views online. When one unelected judge can override the policies of a president elected by tens of millions of citizens just because they disagree, our democracy is in danger, she asserts. She points to the imbalance. In just a few months, Trump's current term has faced over 30 judicial blocks, compared to only 15 under Biden over 3 years. To Karoline, this proves a faction within the judiciary is operating as a shadow opposition, rather than an impartial check on power. In response, she supports congressional efforts, especially the Rogue Rulings Act, aimed at limiting the ability of local district courts to issue sweeping federal injunctions. She also advocates for the impeachment of judges proven to have let political bias taint their rulings. This position, of course, is controversial. Legal scholars and rights groups warn that restricting judicial authority risks upsetting the balance of power among the three branches of government. But Karoline counters, checks and balances don't mean allowing one branch to suppress the others through personal ideology. In a country where feminism has gone through waves from suffrage to reproductive rights to wage equality, Karoline Leavitt emerges as a new archetype, a conservative woman of faith, a young mother, and a top communicator at the White House. She doesn't just speak to conservative female voters. She offers a fresh interpretation of what women's empowerment means today. Karoline doesn't call herself a feminist. She doesn't join campaigns aimed at shattering the glass ceiling. But her life itself is a powerful rebuttal to the idea that women must choose between motherhood, leadership, and tradition. She lives all three and inspires a new generation by doing so. When asked about her role model, she doesn't cite a CEO or global leader. She names her mother, a quiet, resilient woman who sacrificed for her children, who didn't make headlines but always showed up. That, for Karoline, redefines success in the modern era, not climbing ladders for recognition, but standing firm in love, integrity, and faith. She also rejects the narrative that Trump doesn't empower women. "I'm living proof," she says, and so are the many women holding top positions in this administration. Her core message to American women is clear. You don't need to sacrifice your faith, abandon your family, or surrender your femininity to succeed. In a society confused between real value and manufactured narratives, Karoline carves a different path. And that's exactly what makes her stand out. Karoline Leavitt is far from flawless. She's young, occasionally blunt, and has made her share of communication stumbles. But her imperfections make her more real and more relatable to millions of Americans who feel estranged from the polished political class. In an era defined by partisan division, toxic discourse, collapsing trust in institutions, and legal weaponization, Karoline is a fresh voice from a new generation, but rooted in timeless ideals: service, faith, duty, and family. She doesn't just represent conservatism. She embodies a different kind of leadership. Not overly rehearsed, not crowd-pleasing, but honest, brave, and unafraid to take a stand. Whether you support or oppose Trump, many agree, Karoline is one of the most compelling political figures of the next generation. She is not a product of the system, she is a challenge to it. If America truly is changing, Karoline Leavitt may be one of the clearest signs. The only question left is, will you join the wave or stand on the sidelines?